Thanks everyone for joining us for Clergy Penitent Privilege with Father Jim Connell. My name is Carol Midbow. I'm the SNAP chapter leader in Austin, Texas. During this time, we ask that you please ensure your microphone is muted and your video is off so that we can listen to our speaker without distraction. Father Connell pre-recorded his session, and at the end of the session, there will be a slide with his contact information for which you can use to reach out to him with any questions that you may have at the end of the session. There will be a short Q&A that I will stay on for if you have any questions of me as the moderator. We hope that you enjoy this conference. After the session, I encourage you to visit our friend Mitch Garabidian about how SNAP has helped his clients if you're so moved. There is a donate link below Mitch's video where you can make a gift to SNAP to help offset the cost of this conference. Father Jim Connell lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and is an advocate for sexual abuse victims and survivors. He is a member of Catholic Whistleblowers and a priest of the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. For more than 10 years, working alone and with others, Jim has been seeking and proclaiming the truth in Catholic clergy sexual abuse. As Jim says, without the whole and complete truth, there can be no justice, and without justice, there will be no healing. Please enjoy this video session. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jim Connell, and I'm speaking to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where I live. I am a Catholic priest here in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, and for a bit over 10 years now, I have been standing publicly with victims, survivors of Catholic clergy sexual abuse, calling for the truth, for the revelation of the whole and complete truth from the Catholic Church. Nothing to be kept secret, everything out in the open. In the course of doing this, a certain mantra has been developed. I use, maybe others used it as well. Simply stated is that without the whole and complete truth, there can be no justice. And without justice, there will be no healing. Without the whole and complete truth, there can be no justice. And without justice, there will be no healing. Now today I would like to discuss with you a law, a particular law, a law that protects criminals and endangers children. And this law is known as a Clergy Penitent Privilege, a Clergy Penitent Privilege. My talk today I divide into three sections. The first part of my presentation will be a discussion of just what's the problem? What do I see? Second part of the presentation will be explaining what I have been doing during the last 2 years to deal with this problem. And then the third part of my presentation, the final part, will be some ideas on what maybe you and I can do to deal with this problem, try to improve the situation. So what's the problem? What am I talking about? To get it focused, I find maybe a word to start with is the word secret. Secret. Individuals have secrets. Families have secrets. Businesses have secrets. Governments have secrets. Even churches have secrets. Secrets are part of human life. But when secrets are able to hide the criminal while endangering children, that form of secrecy is immoral. And if that form of secrecy is embedded in a law, then that law needs to be changed, to be repealed or to be revised. As we probably are aware, all the 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the territories of the United States have enacted legislation establishing laws that require certain persons to report to civil authorities information that those persons obtain concerning abuse or neglect of a child. These laws are referred to as mandatory reporting laws. And the people who are required to report the information are known as mandatory reporters. And it could very well be that many of you who are watching today are a mandatory reporter. I'm a mandatory reporter. And I'm sure we all take this responsibility very, very seriously. Most states have established clergy as required reporters, but not all states. And that might be something you would want to look into in your state. Are clergy mandatory reporters? They ought to be, I think. Maybe look at your law and see if clergy are not mandatory reporters. Maybe you and others can be working with your legislators to get the law changed. It's important. It's important. Now, this law I'm discussing today, the Clergy Penitent Privilege, it is a law that creates an exception. It excuses the clergy from reporting information about abuse and neglect of a child to civil authorities. It might even completely prevent it from happening. That type of a law, as I say, is not valid. It's not appropriate, I mean. We need to get those changed. Now, when it prevents the clergy, I'm talking about clergy of all faiths, men and women, clergy of whatever sort, the law can apply and stop them from reporting this information to the officials. These mandatory clergy penitent privilege laws might be part of the mandatory reporting law itself, or they might be in separate legislation, such as the rules of evidence, that are rules that govern what can be brought into a courtroom, what information can be brought into a courtroom for a trial or other proceedings. What I would like to do now, maybe help you better understand what these laws are like, is to read to you two statutes, just two. The first one I want to read to you is from the state of Wisconsin. So this is the Clergy Penitent Privilege here in Wisconsin. And this is found within the mandatory reporting law itself. And so you could go online, find the Wisconsin mandatory reporting law, read down that law, and you would find a spot where clergy are identified as mandatory reporters. And then very quickly after that, you would find the following. A member of the clergy is not required to report child abuse information that he or she receives solely through confidential communications made to him or her privately or in a confessional setting if he or she is authorized to hear or is accustomed to hearing such communications under the disciplines, tenets, or traditions of his or her religion as a duty, or is expected to keep these communications secret. Now that's the Clergy Penitent Privilege here in Wisconsin, and it's part of that law. Let me now read to you the statute, and this comes from the state of Washington, and this is found in their rules of law, the rules of law. And so in those rules it says, a member of the clergy, a Christian Science practitioner listed in the Christian Science Journal, or a priest shall not, without the consent of a person making the confession or sacred confidence, be examined as to any confession or sacred confidence made to him or her in his or her professional character in the course of discipline enjoined by the church to which he or she belongs. So those are two examples of a clergy penitent privilege. And as you can see by the wording, they would excuse or even prevent members of the clergy, whatever faith, from bringing forward information that they know of concerning abuse, neglect of a child. And I am saying that is very much wrong. Now, there are some states that deny the clergy this privilege. They deny it. Privilege is frozen for them when it concerns abuse or neglect of a child. I'm aware of 6 such states. Now, maybe others, I apologize if I'm missing some, but New Hampshire, West Virginia, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, and Texas. Those states have laws that deny the clergy the privilege to keep quiet. The clergy have to speak up, as all the other mandatory reporters. And I am saying the other states should do the same. They all should be denying that privilege to clergy to keep quiet. They all should be speaking up and informing the civil authorities. Frankly, that's the point of my presentation. I'll be explaining what I've been doing and what we can do together in the future, but it is about getting laws changed that would hide the criminals and endanger the children. Now, it seems to me that there are, in life I should say there are, but that people in general trust their physicians and they trust their psychologists, even though the physicians and psychologists are mandatory reporters. People still trust that they can talk to their doctors, explaining whatever they want to explain, saying whatever they want to say, and trusting in the confidence of those professionals, even though they're mandatory reporters. And I'm saying the same should be true for the clergy. The clergy should be treated in the exact same way. They should be required to report abuse or neglect of a child, as is a doctor or a psychologist, and people still would trust in them to held things in confidence of any other sort. That's important. This is all about protecting children. It's about protecting the children, not protecting the criminals. So that's the problem as I see it. And now, with that, let me move into the second part of my presentation. So the question for the second part of my presentation is simply, well, what have I been doing about this clergy penitent privilege? How have I been kind of combating this problem that I see? My journey in this regard would go back to November of 2018, almost 2 years ago. In the other part of November 2018, the National Catholic Reporter ran online a commentary that I wrote challenging the Catholic Church's seal of confession law. The seal of confession. That's a law in the church that requires the priest hearing a confession to keep absolutely confidential, completely confidential, no exceptions, anything that is said in the confessional, anything that is said about that sin or whatever is being confessed. Any priest who deliberately violates the seal of confession would be immediately, automatically excommunicated. It's a most serious law in the church, and every priest knows well about the seal of confession. The seal of confession law goes back at least to the 12th century. It's well documented then and from then forward. Exactly its roots before then, not clear. But there are some people who will say that the seal of confession is part of divine law, that the good Lord included it when establishing the sacrament of penance or reconciliation or confession. It goes by 3 names, but it's all the same sacrament. And some say that it was by divine law that the Lord intended the seal of confession to be there. Never say a word. Well, I don't agree that it's by divine law. I say it's by church law. And for proof, I would turn to statements in the Catholic Church's official teaching, in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Now, the Catechism, that's updated from time to time, but the version that is most current right now goes back to the early 1990s and was promulgated by then Pope John Paul II. In the Catechism of the Catholic Church is in section...
Can you raise the volume?
For those of you who might want to check this out, 1447. It teaches us that during the early centuries of the church, centuries, that's hundreds of years, the sacrament of reconciliation for certain very serious sins, such as murder, adultery, idolatry, it included public penances. And the public penances could go on for years. That's what the Catechism teaches in 1447. Well, centuries of public penances hardly endorses a seal of confession. Did the Holy Spirit have a change of heart at some point? No, I don't think so. Moreover, the Church teaches in the Catechism, in paragraph 1467, it teaches that the Church declared the law of the seal of confession. So the Church declared it. The Church created this law, and for understandable reasons of sorts. But as I've said in the first section of my comments, if any of this secrecy in law that hides the criminal and endangers children, it's immoral and needs to be changed, and that includes the seal of confession. A pope made the law. A later pope could change the law. In the Catholic Church, a pope is a pope is a pope. Just as one has all that authority at one point in time, a successor has the same authority in the Church. And so the current pope or a future pope could change this law, and simply by adding another phrase in the law. Priests cannot divulge what goes on in confession, comma, except in matters concerning sexual abuse of a minor or vulnerable adult, period. It's that simple to change. The Pope could do it. The Pope could do it. Well, in any event, after this commentary ran in the NCR, very quickly after that, I received an email from somebody I don't know, I've never met this person, different part of the country, but the person sent me this email and said, thanks for the commentary, but by the way, maybe you should take a look at a particular article. He was referring to a Louisiana State University law review article, 2018 LSU Law School Review article. And it was written by a person who was writing about the seal of confession, but from the perspective of civil law. Now, what this author said, and says appropriately and very well says, the author points out that even if the Catholic Church were to change this law, the seal of confession law, the priest would still be barred from communicating with civil authorities because of the Clergy Penitent Privilege. Well, I thought to myself very quickly, this author has a point, and that really becomes the arena where the effort needs to go, dealing with the Clergy Penitent Privilege. I have no illusions of thinking that somehow I'm going to easily change church law. No, that won't happen. But maybe if there's enough pressure coming from the civil society about changing laws to protect children and not the criminals, maybe that eventually would change things in the church as well. So I took on the project. How do I go about this now? Well, obviously I've got to find the laws, and then I've got to communicate with the legislators. No small project was that. Going online, state by state, I was able to find the mandatory reporting laws, and I was able to find the Clergy Penitent Privilege laws. Slowly, meticulously, but it could happen. Once I knew what states I was looking at, then I decided I need to find how to contact the legislators. Now, if you remember, in November of 2018, we had elections, national elections, local elections, not for the president then, but for other elections. And in many states, probably all the states, that included some elections for members of the state legislature. So I knew it was probably wise that even though in November, December, I was identifying which states to contact, I needed to wait until the new legislatures would be sworn in January of 2019, so I could go online in the states and find the email addresses, which I did. And again, it's very findable. It takes a fair amount of effort, but find an email address, highlight, copy, click, and develop my own file of these email addresses. And then, state by state, both legislators, their state senate, as well as their state assembly, I sent them an email. And I began with my own state of Wisconsin. First state, I got to work at it here home first. In any event, I sent these emails, and in these emails, I was really basically doing three things. One, I presented to them their Clergy Penitent Privilege. found it online. It was easy enough to do. Highlight it, copy it, put it in the body of an email, and they could read their clergy penitent privilege. Then in the email to them, I explained why I consider that a problem. It's hiding the criminal and endangering the children. But I explained that. And then I asked them to take the action necessary to change this in their state, introduce the legislation necessary to make it be different, to protect the children, not the criminal. I ended up the other day, I contacted 39 states, their legislatures. I heard back from maybe 50 legislators. I did not count that up again, I'm not sure exactly. But when you consider all the legislators in each of the states, there's a lot of email addresses and a lot of emails. So to get back 50 responses is not a high percentage, not at all. But it was a beginning. And in a few situations, I heard back from more than one within a state. So I was able to have follow-up contact with them and getting them connected so that they would know there were 2 or more in their state who at least responded to say, hey, thanks, didn't know about this. We need to look at this. We got to be protecting the children. And they appreciated it. And that was good. I was happy to hear about that. Now, to the best of my knowledge, at this point in time, there are 4 states that have, say in 2019, introduced legislation to address the clergy penitent privilege, either repeal the clergy penitent privilege or to modify. 4 states. I'm not sure they were responding to my emails. The state that had the largest, most noted in the news at least, activity was the state of California. There was a state senator named Jerry Hill who introduced legislation to repeal the clergy penitent privilege in California, and they got a lot of news. When I became aware of that, and it was well underway before I had done anything, but I sent to his office, sent him an email, contacted staff, saying, hey, I'm a Catholic priest, I agree with you, let's get this arranged, what can I do to help? Well, they got back to me and said, well, how would you like to write something to committee members? So I put together an email to committee members explaining why I am in favor of this and why I would be arguing with their bishops, the Catholic bishops in California, why this law ought to change. And it eventually got to the floor of the Senate and was voted upon, and it passed in the Senate. I don't remember the exact vote, but it was a handsome victory. It was good. Well, then it went to the House, the Assembly, California State Assembly. A different result. It really did not go far at all. And by then, one of the things I'm told that happened is that the faith communities, certainly the Catholic bishops in California, but other faith communities as well, kind of joined ranks together and got to the legislators, the assembly people to say, hey, wait, this is the problem. Don't do this, don't do this. And it stopped. So maybe Senator Hill and others will reintroduce legislation. I hope so. I'll certainly be willing to help them. Those of you who are in California, you might want to contact Senator Hill's office or your own legislators and see what's going on. There may be some activity there where you can pitch in and help with that. I also know there was a bill introduced in Utah. I heard about it and I contacted the legislator who introduced it. A little communication back and forth, but I'm not sure exactly where that had headed. That was later in 2019, maybe the beginning of 2020. By then we're getting into pandemic time, and of course a lot has changed as a result of the pandemic. But Utah would be a second state where something is going on. The third one is Missouri, and that was a little chuckle in my voice there because when I sent the emails to the legislators in Missouri, very promptly, I had an email from a legislator, and it simply said, consider the bill introduced. Wow, that's the response I want. Great, fantastic. So we communicated, chatted, and communicated. And eventually, in fact, the legislator did introduce a bill. I believe it was in the beginning of 2020. But to the best of my knowledge, actually to the best of my knowledge, I don't know if there was any support. I don't know if there were others joining in the support of that bill or not. And again, pandemic time, so I don't know what has happened there. The fourth state where I know something was introduced is my own state of Wisconsin. And this was not new idea in Wisconsin, and probably perhaps not a new idea in those other states either. This sort of legislation had been introduced in the past. But in in late November, early December, a bill was introduced in Wisconsin to repeal the Clergy Penitent Privilege law here, the one I read to you just a few minutes ago. And that was supported both by members in the Senate and in the Assembly. I think about 20 or 25 co-sponsors between the two houses. However, they were all Democrats, no Republicans. And in December, right after Christmas, as I recall, there was a news conference in Milwaukee supporting this. And of course, there were some legislators there, some victim survivors were there, and some of the local officials, the district attorney of Milwaukee County was there supporting this. When this bill was introduced, at the same time, these legislators also introduced a Child Victims Act, different legislation, but they were introduced at the same time. Of course, right after that, we're into 2020 and into the pandemic time, and I'm not sure, really, to my knowledge, it didn't gain a lot more traction, and we'll probably have to begin all over. But it does indicate that there are 4 states where there was activity, bills introduced. If there are 4, there could be lots more if we just put some energy into it and bring that about. Now, a little switching gears to change of scene, so to speak. I mentioned that in California, at least in the other states perhaps as well, but in California, the Catholic bishops mounted some real opposition, and they've opposed this sort of legislation throughout the country in the past. And the bishops' argument when they oppose this legislation, they argue that it would violate their free exercise of religion as guaranteed by the Free Exercise of Religion Clause in the First Amendment of the Constitution. That they're the right to exercise the seal of confession, part of their religion, that this would be, if we change this, it's going to force them to be in violation of their right to exercise their religion. And apparently this argument has carried weight, in the past. Now, I argue against this. I believe this is not a sound argument, and I have 2 perspectives on this that I will now like to explain to you. I argue against the bishops in this regard, both from what I say, and I know others say this as well, it's not an original thought to me, that the children have a fundamental right to be protected from abuse. A fundamental right. So that's one of my arguments that says it's not just simply a matter of the free exercise of religion. There's a fundamental right involved for children to be protected. In addition, I say there is an argument against the bishops that is based in the teachings of the Catholic Church itself. And I'll explain this in a minute as well. So I argue against the bishops, not simply because of the fundamental right of the children, but also because they're not paying attention to their own teachings as written in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Now, to the fundamental right of the children first. I mentioned before, reminded us, we're probably all aware of it, that throughout the country, all of the states, the District of Columbia, and the territories have enacted mandatory reporting laws. Well, the fact that all of these jurisdictions, the states and the territories and the district, have these laws means that throughout the country, in the heart of the people, protecting children is so important that they would establish these mandatory reporting laws. Protecting the children is so important, it's a fundamental right of the children. Perhaps it is, I say, akin to the fundamental right that a child has to a public school education. Now, that fundamental right to a public school education was solidified in law by the United States Supreme Court in a landmark decision in 1954, in a decision known as Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. And in that decision, the Supreme Court ruled that all children, regardless of race or religion or any other characteristic, all of the children have a right to a public school education. And I'm saying that I should say this too, that argument for the education of the children is based on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Equal protection. And I'm saying it's that same equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment. It seems to me, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a priest. I'm not a lawyer. But it seems to me logically it would be the same argument. If the free protection clause guarantees education, it ought to guarantee protection then from abuse and neglect as well. And so therefore I would say as these laws are changed, yes, the free exercise of religion might be hampered a bit, frustrated a bit. Well, so be it. I don't think that that's a compelling interest. The free exercise of religion is a compelling interest greater than the compelling interest of the government to protect its children from abuse and neglect. That's a fundamental right. Now, in addition, I would say, I want to move on now to my explanation of this within the church law, because not only the bishops ignoring the fundamental right of the children, when they argue this, that they're opposing any change to the clergy penitent privilege, they're ignoring some very important teaching from the church. And the Catholic Church teaches that the governments have a right and a responsibility to prevent aggressors from inflicting harm. Prevent the aggressor from inflicting harm. And you can check this in the Catechism, those who want to check it out. It's in paragraph section 2266. 2266. That the governments have a right to protect people from the harm being inflicted. Moreover, that same section says the governments have a right and a duty to punish evildoers with punishment that is equal to the crime committed. But they have a right and responsibility to punish. Well, the bishops are ignoring that. They're ignoring that they have governments have a responsibility to protect from harm being done. They have a responsibility. No, the bishops are ignoring that. They shouldn't be ignoring it. Moreover, the Catechism teaches that by punishing, by stopping the harm, by punishing the evildoers, they are protecting society. It's in that same paragraph in the Catechism. It helps to protect society. It helps the common good of society. And the bishops have to be about that. They're not respecting that. They're not paying attention to that teaching as well. And finally, that section of the Catechism says that the punishment can have a medicinal effect to actually help change the evildoer. Perhaps the counseling or whatever would happen would be such that the person could be changed. So there's teachings there that are being ignored by the bishops. They should be paying attention to and helping to bring about change in these clergy penitent privilege laws, not trying to defend them. Now, there's another teaching in the Catechism that the bishops seem to be ignoring, and that comes from a different section. It comes from paragraph 1459, 1459. And that's where we're taught that, when somebody wants forgiveness, well, it's not just reconciliation with Almighty God. The sinner also has to reconcile with society. The sinner has to repair damage done. Repair the damage done. Whatever damage has been done. Property, reputation, whatever. And that would include the damage caused by the trauma of sexual abuse of a child. If the sinner wants to be reconciled with God, the sinner also has to reconcile with society. That's a teaching of the Catholic Church. And that makes a lot of sense. It's not just a matter of saying something in secret to a priest and getting a blessing or something. No. There's a penance involved. There's a reconciliation that has to take place. And the sinner, if repentant, has to want to repair the damage as well. So for the bishops to turn away from all of that, then I think they are missing the boat. They are not doing what needs to be done. So I recognize, that there's the value there is in the free exercise of religion. And I'm not opposed to exercise of religion. I'm a priest, and I have people in the parishes and so forth. But we also have to know that we have to protect the children and not be protecting the criminals. And so therefore, I think, we need to call the bishops to task when they want to argue that, or anybody else who wants to argue that we should leave the clergy penitent privilege as it is. No, no, no. Argue with them. Get it changed. Get it changed. That's what we need to be about. So that kind of explains what I've been doing, contacting legislators and so forth, the history, how it came about, and the arguments, and we need to keep going forward is what it seems to me. So with that, I'm going to, let's call it, that's the end of the second part of my presentation. And let me now move forward into the third part. Let's now spend some time talking about the future and what we can do to help resolve or change some of these state laws. For my part, I'm going to pick up where things left off, but I think we all have to recognize where we are as a society right now. And I'm referring, of course, to the pandemic that's going on. And that may hamper a bit what we can do. But within the context of that, I really think there are some things we can do. We can get information, pull things together so that we're ready to do something when there's more of an opportunity to move. So for example, one of the things I want to do is to reach out to some of the legislators whom I contacted in the past. Certainly the 4 states where there has been legislation going on in the past, I want to find out where they're at, what's going on, what's the future look like there. Then I think there's also, we've got the elections coming up, and after the elections in November, who will be part of the state legislatures, that will be known. And that may give you a chance to look and see what's going on in your state. Who are the legislators there? I also think it's important that we do a little homework with just the laws and so forth. Now, I would encourage all of you to want to look up your own state mandatory reporting law. Maybe you're very familiar with it, that could be. But when 2 years ago, I would have to admit, no, I'd seen it, looked at it, but I couldn't say I was familiar with it. So I needed to get up to speed a bit with that. And I think that's something we can do. It's online, it's information you can find. And you can find the Clergy Penitent Privilege, if it's in your state. And you can find whether or not the clergy are mandatory reporters. All that you can find out even before the election, perhaps. I mean, that's just information that's there. Then I think once you have the information at hand, you know what your state's mandatory reporting law says, and you understand the clergy penitent privilege in your state. Then I think it's a question of maybe even practicing a bit. Talk to the wall or something, but practice how you would explain to others what's going on. How would you explain to others what the problem is? It's one thing to go around it in your mind, isn't it? Just, oh, I can think about it. It's another thing to speak. I found when I started talking about it, I found myself, I had to practice a bit. What I was going to say, what vocabulary I wanted to have ready at hand. What are the words that I needed? Maybe write those on a piece of paper. But once you've got things in hand and you've figured out who you need to talk to and what you want to say, well, then maybe that's the time to start contacting legislators with emails or whatever's comfortable for you, maybe a phone call. I would not discard the idea either of meeting, face-to-face with legislators. Do you know the legislators in your state? Do you know your own assembly representative or your state senator? Have you contacted them before about something? Do you know anybody who's on their staff? Then you may want to try also to talk to people in your area, in your state, who might be involved with this sort of issue. Maybe there's a SNAP group that meets in your area, and you can get together with them or talk about this. Or maybe you have some friends that are just up to date with the problem. They know, maybe you know some other survivors. Maybe you have some other supporters of survivors, people with whom you can speak. Because I do think that it's going at this alone, quite an uphill battle, but going it with others might make the effort just a little bit lighter. And then there may be other ideas that surface, and that's not a minor point. Some of you maybe have listened to this presentation And you may be thinking of a whole different approach, something that needs to be pursued. And I've not thought about it. I don't have all the answers. So maybe, you need to speak up to me, to leadership at SNAP, to wherever, to with your idea. Get it out there. You be the one that might be the person who's got the best idea of how we go about better protecting children by addressing these clergy penitent privilege laws, getting them repealed or getting them modified, whatever can be done, whatever is the practical thing to do. And of course, when it comes to changing laws, we all know it's a matter of practically what can happen, and there's a lot of give and take, and it doesn't necessarily happen quickly and overnight. But it doesn't mean we stop. We have to keep at it. We have to keep going and doing whatever we can. That's important to help the children with that. So I think it's important that you think about putting some energy into the future. I need to do that as well. I need to do that as well. And also the point of the Catholic Church and its seal of confession, I can't walk away from that issue. I realize changing the church, not an easy chore, but that's something to be pursued, as well. And you might want to discuss even that with church members, and maybe practice, maybe even talking to your pastor if you're Catholic, and if you see a pastor, you know somebody, maybe deliberately seek out some priest and discuss it. Learn the obstacles, learn what they would say. How many priests have even stopped to think about this issue? I don't know. But there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of challenge, and we don't want to just turn away from it. The children are so precious. We want to make sure we keep them in mind as we work through this. So keep at it, keep doing whatever you can, keep in touch with me. Let me just, though I think that it's coming up on the screen, but let me also just give you my contact information. My name again is Jim Connell. That's C-O-N-N-E-L-L, Jim Connell. My phone number here in Milwaukee is 414-940-8054. 414-940-8054. That's my only phone. That's a cell phone. It's my only phone. My email address is connell.jim951@gmail.com. So Connell.Jim, that's me, Connell.Jim951@gmail.com. And feel free to contact me with ideas or seeking help or information. I'd be happy to work with you in whatever way. And if something develops in your state and you want some ideas on how to approach or what to say to legislators and put things in writing, I'd be happy to help you with that. No problem with that whatsoever. So you feel very free to contact me. So let's keep at it, remembering without a whole and complete truth, there can be no justice, and without justice, there will be no healing. And dealing with the clergy penitent privilege laws will help in that regard. So bless you, keep up the good work, and thank you very much. Goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed that session as much as I did. Father Connell couldn't be with us here today, and he asked that everyone reach out to him via email or phone. We did add 2 new roundtables. One of them will be later this evening. It'll be a networking event for everyone to gather to try and replicate what we do if we were in person. And that information will be out soon. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to me regarding what we're working on in the Lutheran group. Other than that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference, and I will see you during our networking session. Bye.